didn't have quite as much time as I wanted to practice this week, so I made a little screencast for you to review on your own and practice. This will be a good way for you to check your answers as well. Since you have the document in front of you, you could also use it to review, print it off again, and practice. So just as a review, we had talked about the difference between a phrase and clause, and I had you highlight some important terms as you were working or as we were reviewing in class. So the only difference between a phrase and a clause is that a clause has a subject and a verb, and that's really where we're going to be focusing more of our energy right now. As we look at transitions, we've done adverbs, we've done prepositional phrases, which don't have a verb in them, and we've talked about infinitives, which don't have a subject in them. So now we're going to get into dependent clauses as transitions, and these are parts of sentences that cannot stand alone, and we recognize them by looking for a subordinating conjunction, which we'll talk about on the next page. And the difference between a dependent clause and independent, when we look at this prefix here, independent, you're not dependent, you're able to stand on your own with no help. And in writing, we would call that a complete sentence. So as we looked at our woobuses, we had quite a few of our woobuses that also could be prepositions, and I had you highlight them: after, before, since, until, and as. And I had you highlight them because we have to really take a second to stop and think about how they're being used. If they're being used as prepositions, our formula that we've talked about is a preposition with a noun at the end, and there aren't allowed to be any verbs. When we talk about an awubus, the big key is that we're looking for an awubus that's followed by a subject and a verb. So if I see after, and the phrase is after school, I know that's a prepositional phrase because there's no verb in there. But if the phrase says after I went to school, I've got a subject and a verb. It's being used as an awubus, and that tells me it's a dependent clause. I had you add a few more subordinating conjunctions down at the bottom of your list because I couldn't possibly give you all of them, but these are just some of the more common ones. We have this special list that we call our woobuses to help us remember that some of them begin with an A, some with a W, a U, a B, an I, and an S, but there are really plenty more that don't fit into that criteria. So we all got to the point where we had started practicing, and I think we did the first one. Our goal is to look for where do we see one of these words in our chart or in our list in the sentence. And in this case, it was while. And once we find the subordinating conjunction, that tells us where the dependent clause is. The dependent clause starts with that subordinating conjunction, and I have you underline it. While I know that dinosaurs are extinct. If I took that conjunction out, I have a complete sentence. I know that dinosaurs are extinct. What makes it dependent is that subordinating conjunction. So the other thing I want you to practice or get in the habit of doing is making sure you're checking to make sure it's a dependent clause by recognizing the subject and the verb. I is the subject and know is the verb. If this is our dependent clause, then it has to be attached to an independent clause to make sense. And in this case, here's my sentence: I am not so sure about Bigfoot. Lots of medical research is being done on cancer in order that we may find a cure. One of the other things we've practiced doing in class is getting rid of prepositional phrases. So let's do that. Of medical research is a prepositional phrase. On cancer. And I see in order, but I happen to know that in order that is a subordinating conjunction. In class, we might have done it like this, where we crossed off in order because it does look like a prepositional phrase, and we have that as our subordinating conjunction. Either way is fine as far as I'm concerned for right now. Now my job is to figure out where the dependent clause is. My clue And the whole purpose that I have you circle the subordinating conjunction is to find the beginning of it. If that is the subordinating conjunction, then that we may find a cure is my dependent clause. Now, of course, I want to double check to make sure it's a dependent clause, that it's got a subject and a verb. So I look, we is the subject, and I see find as a verb, but I also know it has a helping verb. So together, these two act as a verb. We may find. If I look at what's left in the other part of the sentence, lots is being done. Lots is my subject, and then this whole thing is my verb phrase. Okay, Jazzy doesn't want to leave Universal Studios until she has taken the tour again. Let's see. Anything we can get rid of in this sentence, first of all. I see to leave is an infinitive. We show those by using brackets. I see until, and I know that until is one of those special ones that we need to watch out for. If it's followed by a subject and a verb, it's an awubis. If it's just a noun after it, then it's going to be a prepositional phrase. So I need to think about that a little bit more. Jazzy doesn't want to leave Universal Studios until she has taken the tour again. I don't see the sentence ending at until she, so that phrasing doesn't make much sense. So in this case, I can tell that until is being used as a subordinating conjunction, and I know that that's where my dependent clause is going to start, until she has taken the tour again. Now, just to double check, I want to make sure there's a subject and a verb. She is a subject. Take has a helping verb. Has taken is my verb. In my independent clause, Jazzy doesn't want to leave Universal Studios. I see my subject is Jazzy, who it's about, and what she's doing. Does want, doesn't want. Now, the big purpose of us looking at these dependent clauses is to find how they're being used in sentences to add description. We talk about transitions a lot in that they come at the beginnings of sentences. So if I look at these three sentences and I want to see if I have a transition, I'm looking to make sure that the dependent clause is at the beginning. And I can see very clearly that it is here, while I know that dinosaurs are extinct. And just like prepositional phrases, infinitives, adverbs at the beginning of a sentence, we need to make sure that there's a comma after it. If my dependent clause is at the end, then there's no reason for the comma. There's no pause there. Okay, and then I can also tell these are not being used as transitions because they're not at the beginning of the sentence. So this is the first part of a review over the dependent clauses. The next screencast that you'll do will be actually your own independent practice.